will you have after 500 years?
You, Dad. I still have you.
It is hard forgiving. It is even harder forgetting. When a person hurts you, your mind immediately goes to all the possible things you could do to make up for the pain you felt. You want them to hurt the way you hurt. And this is made infinitely worse when the person who breaks you is someone you love. Mark Grayson saw his father, his absolute hero, beat him to near death. He watched a symbol of strength, fairness, and selflessness turn on the very people he once swore to protect, destroying the lives of thousands in minutes. He lay there, choking on his own blood, and heard his father call his mother a pet. He saw a side to Omni Man he never thought possible. How does anyone come back from that? How do you look at the man who shattered your world, your family, and your face, and find anything resembling peace? To be honest, most of us wouldn't know where to start. But Mark Grayson seems to know something we don't. Today, we are going to break down the anatomy of the greatest act of forgiveness in modern comic history, and find out exactly how he did it. To understand the weight of Mark's forgiveness, we first have to understand the scale of Nolan's crime. In his landmark book, The Sunflower, Holocaust survivor Simon Wiesenthal poses a devastating question. Are there limits to forgiveness? If someone commits an atrocity, not just against you, but against thousands of innocent people, do you even have the moral authority to forgive them? Nolan doesn't just betray Mark emotionally. He weaponizes Mark's own body to slaughter the people of Chicago. Robert Kirkman deliberately pushes Nolan past the trope of a bad superhero dad, directly into the realm of a war criminal. When Ian McEwan explores trauma in his novel, Atonement, he writes about how some actions in reality simply cannot be undone, making true forgiveness impossible. You can't just say, sorry for Chicago. The damage is permanent. For Mark, the betrayal is so absolute that forgiving his father feels like a betrayal to the human race. And yet, he does. But not in the way you might think. Months later, Mark is pulled to the alien world of Thraxa. He walks into a throne room, and there he is. The man who nearly killed him. The man who called his mother a pet. If this were a standard superhero story, this is where the revenge match happens. Mark should power up, fueled by rage, and give Nolan the beatdown he deserves. Instead, Mark breaks down. He runs forward, and he hugs him. In literature, this is called radical grace. In Victor Hugo's Les Misérables, a hardened criminal steals from a bishop. When caught, instead of condemning him, the bishop forgives him and gives him even more treasure. That single, shocking act of unearned grace completely rewrites the criminal's soul. That is exactly what Mark does to Nolan. Viltrumite culture is built purely on strength, dominance, and social Darwinism. Mercy is a genetic flaw. Violence is the only universal language. By hugging the man who broke him, Mark introduces a weapon that the Viltrumite Empire has absolutely no defense against: unconditional empathy. That hug doesn't just shock Nolan, it shatters his thousands of years old conditioning. But here is where Invincible elevates itself above a fairy tale. Mark hugging his dad doesn't magically fix everything. In Khaled Hosseini's masterpiece, The Kite Runner, the protagonist commits a terrible betrayal. To earn his redemption, he can't just apologize. He has to physically travel into a war zone, endure a brutal beating, and sacrifice his own safety. Hosseini teaches us that true forgiveness is a starting line, not a finish line. Mark grants Nolan grace, but the narrative forces Nolan to earn his redemption in blood. To truly accept Mark's forgiveness, Nolan has to turn his back on his people. He gets his spine literally ripped in half. He faces execution. He has to dismantle the very empire he spent millennia building. Mark's capacity for empathy is his greatest superpower, but it's also a heavy burden. We see this later when Mark tries to apply this same grace to David Anders, Dinosaurus. Mark tries to see the good in David's intellect, but unlike Nolan, whose love for Mark broke his conditioning, David's cold, utilitarian violence constantly pushes the limits of what Mark can manage. It proves Mark isn't blindly naive. He desperately wants to heal people, but Nolan was the only one whose love was stronger than his programming. In her novel, Gilead, Marilynne Robinson writes about how forgiving someone isn't usually a dramatic showdown. Most of the time, it's a quiet, grueling internal struggle between our own human resentment and our desire to be good. Mark Grayson is invincible, not just because he can take a punch that would level a mountain. He is invincible because his humanity, his ability to look at the monster who broke his heart and still see his father, could not be beaten out of him. He didn't forget what Nolan did. Forgetting is impossible. But by choosing radical grace over revenge, Mark didn't just save his father's soul. He eventually saved the entire universe. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more deep dives into the psychology and lore of the Invincible Universe, make sure to subscribe